Welcome at the Middle Ground. My name is Valeria and I'm your today's host. Today we're meeting Ailbhe Finn, an Irish visionary and policy thinker who is taking on a bold mission to reinvent liberalism by 2029. For just over 12 years now, Brussels has been her home, and in that time, she's become the executive director of the European Liberal Forum. When I first met Alva, I was struck by something rare. Her ability to make the most complicated European politics feel not just understandable, but relatable and urgent. In less than an hour, she even managed to change my perspective on a few things, and that doesn't happen often. But Alva isn't only about politics. She inherited a few family stocks, and since then, she's been steadily building her own financial stability. Tonight, she'll share some insight on investing and on why Brussels, with all its cultures and contrast, is such a lucky place to call home. Welcome, Alva.
Thank you for having me.
Your grandfather owned stocks, and you inherited a few in the young age. I also remember from our preparatory meeting that your mom always taught you to maximize the interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
How did it shape your relationships with money?
Yeah, well, obviously, I think it's a privilege to inherit something, but it also is sad, right, at the same time. So for me, I always thought, okay, I'm going to make sure that I make the most of this. So I recognize that actually you could keep it or sell it on the basis of what the value is now, right? And then my mum has always been, telling us that we need pensions and things like that. Always telling us how to maximize, as I said, interest rates. So yeah, we learned very early on because of these, little small holdings that we had, how to make your money work for you. And actually, that's why I'm passionate about investing as a woman as well. Sometimes I talk to people, especially women, and they're scared of the idea of investing because they don't know anything, right? But actually, I think that that's the wrong way to look at it. You can learn about anything. And also, sometimes investing can be quite stress-free, depending on your risk profile.
But for people even with high financial literacy, financial crisis was quite a shock. And I know that you graduated during the financial crisis. How did it influence your next steps?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2009, obviously the year after, basically. And before that, I was doing law, and I thought, potentially I'll be a lawyer. But I think I had a kind of almost higher calling. I went to Amsterdam, and I studied public international law with a focus on human rights, but also asylum and migration law. And yeah, that really kind of changed my life, actually. I left Ireland also because I was gay, and wasn't a very nice place to be gay at the time. A lot has changed since then, so we must acknowledge when progress is made, of course. But yeah, when I moved to Amsterdam, I kind of got the taste for this more international geopolitical landscape, and that really set me on the trajectory that I'm on now, and living in Brussels. I wouldn't be living in Brussels if I hadn't studied public international law, I think.
The journey between studying in Amsterdam and ending up in Brussels was filled with another incredible events. And you have this combination of micro and macro level jobs. So the micro level, the one that particularly struck me, was the legal advisor for refugees in Cairo. But then when I look at your macro job, in the representation of Ireland in the UN in Geneva, I'm wondering how do you combine the two?
Yeah, you don't want to hear about the first job I had out of college, which I was working for Specsavers in Australia. Wasn't very not a very interesting. Yeah, but then I moved directly from Australia to Egypt, and it was the month that the revolution broke out. So it was one of my first times living, in the Middle East in a kind of really populous city Cairo is one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in Africa at the time. So it was an amazing experience, but also very difficult. You know, the life of a refugee or an asylum seeker, especially in Cairo, is quite difficult. And during the revolution, even more difficult, right? Because there's instability. But it taught me a lot about not interfering in things you don't know things enough about. I was representing refugees and asylum seekers, but a lot of people around me really involved themselves in the revolution. We know how that ended. So yeah, I think a lot of people got swept away with the idea, not really understanding the context in which you are living in, and that really taught me, you know, you have to understand the culture of where you live in order to understand the politics that is happening. So it really was a formative time for me. And going to this micro macro thing, every day I was working with people whose lives were really difficult. And I was changing it in this very minute way. I was helping them get refugee status there. And sometimes that wasn't changing their lives so much. So actually, towards the end of my experience there, I thought, okay, but what could I actually do, you know, at this higher level to change people's lives for the better? And that's why after that, I started working in NGOs. You mentioned that I worked in the Irish mission to the UN. We were on the Human Rights Council at the time. And that was also very kind of looking from above and trying to set norms and make sure that people respect them at this kind of like higher level. Now, if I look back, I think, and also we know that the UN system is under pressure. Was that the best use of my time? So after this, I really got involved in a lot of campaigns and things like that. I was involved in the abortion referendum in Ireland for many years as a grassroots activist. So every step that I'm making now, I'm thinking, okay, what is the big change that I can make happen through the job that I'm doing now?
You've mentioned working during the revolution outbreak, and I now try to connect it also with the experience of graduating during the financial crisis, and it must have affected your understanding and perception of the risk, especially when we talk about investments.
Yeah.
Would you say that it made you less risky, or you worked through this experience in a way that you are unstoppable now?
I think it gave me a healthy dose of an understanding of risk. I don't think I have very high risk-taking behavior, but some people who do invest, I mean, they will make the most profit. I prefer a kind of low effort type of investing. So I moved a lot of the stocks that I had into exchange trade funds, which are global. They are very diversified and the work is kind of done for you. I also invest in crypto, so maybe I have slight appetite for risk. Sometimes I freak out and I think maybe I should sell all my crypto now, especially as the capital gains tax is coming in next year in Belgium. Bad news for investors, but probably a good news for the Belgian government. Yeah, so I would say that it taught me a lot about risk. It also taught me things that I don't want to do in the future. You know, I'm not, for example, seeking risk like going to war zones and living or working there, although I did go to Ukraine this year, but I only went for a few days. So it really helped me know, okay, what am I willing to, where am I willing to live, and in what circumstances to help people. So yeah, now I'm in Brussels, and I think you can still do a lot from here.
As a liberal, it might be important for you to also do ethical investments. I've read quite a lot about ECG, ETFs, and generally green movement in investment circles. But how do you make sure that you don't split the investments into bad and good? And what's your choice with regard to the green investments?
So I do some ESG investing. So I invest in some ETFs that are tracking certain types of investments, as you say, green. I'm a little bit more skeptical of this idea that you shouldn't invest in, and usually they're quite highly valued, for example, oil or defense or these kind of things. As an investor, right, you want to maximize your profit and get the best return. And for the moment, sometimes, yes, they can be in green investments. But I also think about this idea that, okay, so if ethical investors don't own part of, and I don't also like this phraseology of like bad industry. I think that's actually very counterproductive. If you call industry bad, then you've already put them into this kind of like amoral positioning. And what wouldn't it be better actually if you did own stocks in these companies so that you could push them to do the right thing? So yeah, I want us to move away from this kind of like, I don't know, like green authoritarianism, and actually bring people along with us on the green transition. So for me, I'm not sure how helpful it is to not own or be out of some markets, like for example, oil or etc. And does it really help anyone? And also, does it just lower your return on your investment? But having said that, as I said, like if you want to invest in tech or AI or something like that, or sustainable AI, ETF trackers that are, or companies, yeah, go for it and make sure there's investment there. And in general, I think also the E in ESG is very strong. The S, not as strong, I would say, and the G, same. So I think there's been a big focus on environmental and not so much on social or governance. So that also needs to change, I think.
As an investor based in Belgium, there must be some links that you would recommend to people to look at, especially to women, because they're usually more risk averse.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think you're risk averse?
I think I'm sending most of my money to support Ukrainian army for now, but the moment I realize I can make my money work for me, I'll go to you and
Yeah,
ask you for
yeah.
an
Well,
advice.
I'll tell you some reading. So what I started with was, I mean, this is kind of like the Bible for what you call the FIRE movement, which is financial investment and early retirement movement. And how, yeah, that's how I learned. And the book is Boggleheads, but it's for US investors. And one thing that's really important is if you're going to start investing, that you need to know the rules, the tax situation and scheme in the country where you live, and if you will have to pay any taxes in your home country. At the moment, obviously, we're in the EU, so that's not the case. But for US investors or people who are from the US living in Belgium, it's much more difficult for them. So you need to do your research. As I said, I read Boggleheads first, and that basically told me the kind of baseline levels of what is considered good investment. You know, time in the market beats time out of the market. Don't try and time the market. These are all things that you kind of learn. And if you look at things like, you know, the S&P 500, it's just been rising and rising and rising for many years. Boggleheads would say that you want to diversify your portfolio in case, I don't know, obviously the Chinese market rose very quickly in recent decades. But also other markets might rise. So, for example, India or you know, the BRICS. So try and have diversification and not just own ETFs or stocks. Maybe you want to have bonds. In Belgium, that's not the best investment, unfortunately. The other thing is that you are taxed more on dividends here. So what I do is I invest in accumulating exchange trade funds, so you can own a big part of different parts of markets, so you're diversified. As I said, I also invest in crypto. That's another type of diversification. And one thing that they always tell you is that you should have at least a kind of savings that if you lose your job or something like that, that this money will keep you from selling any equity or stocks that you already own. So you want to basically have like a kind of safety net before you start investing. And every euro that you invest thereafter, you have to not be afraid to lose it. And I would say, if you want to start investing, the first thing to do is read this book, but also you can go onto Reddit. There's like, for example, there's a whole threads on the FIRE movement in Belgium that will tell you the rules that apply here. The other thing that I would also recommend is that you own your own home. You want to be limiting the amount of money that you're just throwing away. And that's what I would say rent is. You're just throwing rent away. The housing market is also a very, very, very good investment. Actually, it's one of the best investments that you can do. Is it easy? No, because you have to invest time, energy, maintenance in making sure that the people who are living in your apartment that you're renting are happy, that everything is okay, you have to get insurance, etc. ETFs, very low energy and quite safe, depending on the profile of risk that you have. You can also go online and look at your risk profile. So just answer some questions and they'll say, well, maybe you should, not invest in this risky emerging market exchange trade funds. And you can also just go for stock. Obviously, I mean, there's all these things about options and etc. But I won't go too much into that because I don't do it myself. As I said, I have a very easy approach to my portfolio. But whenever you want, I can I'll put a lot of links so that you can read up about it and make sure that your money is working for you.
That sounds great. I also think that investment topic generally fits very well into the liberal agenda. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you're on a mission to reinvent liberalism in 21st century. What do you think are the biggest threats for the liberal agenda, and how should liberals respond?
So we're in a big turning point, I would say, in history. You can see that there is an emerging narrative of protectionism, of xenophobia, of anti-globalization that is changing the way that we look at markets, that is changing the way that we look at politics. We also have the attention economy, which is grabbing people's attention and filtering it into things that make us scared of the current moment that we're in. And I would say the struggle for liberalism is that it has been seen as the status quo. But what I would like to do is reinvent liberalism so that we bring people back to the idea that, market, human rights, the liberal order, democracy, these are still good things. Of course, maybe we need to take a radical approach towards reinventing them for the modern age, the age of social media, the age of, maybe there has been a backlash for some people of globalization. But what I think the answer is not fear. The answer is that you take your future into your own hands and that we don't allow, Trump or the populists to tell us a fake story of you're going to be better if we bring industry back to our country. And sometimes it's also this kind of narrative that we're going to re-industrialize somewhere, or reindustrialize the Rust Belt, or bring industry back. But actually, it's technology and a positive approach to reinventing your economy that's really going to change these things. So a lot of it's about myth busting, but also coming up with this more positive narrative that gives people hope in what we've built already. I would say the last 100 years are the biggest period of development in human history. And sometimes I think people forget that. I don't want to say that there aren't problems. Of course there are. There are problems with democracy. There's problems with the free market economy now. But they can be fixed. And I don't think we should jettison all of that progress.
Alva, you came to the European Liberal Forum during quite turbulent times when liberals lost many seats in the European Parliament and the party had to let go many people. You had to manage this whole process, and I'm wondering, did you learn something new about yourself during this task?
I learned that I have a lot of patience and that I can be resilient in a way that I think some people can't. I've been told a few times, and actually whenever I do these kind of like personality tests, they always say that I'm not afraid to step on other people's toes, but I also care about people. That's why, I mean, we've been talking about the work that I did before I came to Brussels, when I would be working kind of directly with people. So yeah, it taught me that sometimes the hard choices are still the right ones, and that if you want to be a leader, you have to have the courage to also make hard decisions, but then do it in a way that helps people. I almost everybody that left at that time, I tried to get them other jobs or at least help them along the way. And actually, that's really worked out well because most of those people who left are still engaged with us. We made them either senior fellows or they're still coming to our events and things like that. So, there's always a way to let people go in a supportive and caring way. Yeah. I mean, in the past, I've also left under circumstances from places, and I always, whenever I leave anywhere, I always want to keep a link. I think it's bad to sever that. Everywhere that I ever worked, I always cared about the people that were there, and I cared about the mission. I think fondly about most of the places that I've worked. So for me, don't ever cut ties like that. You never know when someone from your former life will become important to you again.
One thing that took my attention during our preparatory meeting is that you are picking your battles. You learn how to do that, especially now when the list of tasks is just growing for liberals to deal with. And you used a particular example, gay cakes case. Could you please explain it to us and tell us how do you pick your battles?
I mean, I want to be clear, I've never been involved in a gay wedding cake case, but I often think now that we need to be more strategic as progressive forces on what we want to fight for. And the gay cakes cases, to me, it's almost like using human rights to force people who otherwise wouldn't want to create a gay wedding cake to do something they don't want to do. And I think we need to learn a lesson. You cannot convince people through moral superiority that you are right. You have to bring them with you. And I learned this from campaigning during the abortion referendum in Ireland, that you need to meet people where they are and talk to them in a way that they understand and appeal to their values. If you try and force people to do something, or call you by a certain pronoun without explaining why, and doing it out of this kind of moral superiority and assumed knowledge, that's not going to work. So I think we have a lot more to do as progressive forces to work, for example, on feminism. So many times I hear women complaining about men in this way that is very broad brushstrokes, not another old white man. And I've been guilty of it myself. But we have to understand that this is causing a backlash against progressivism. And as I said, my challenge now, including for liberalism, but like in general and causes that I care about, is to go back to meeting people where they are. Don't assume anything about why someone thinks something, and try and convince them. Don't talk down to them. And yeah, what we say in politics often is show, don't tell.
We have a tradition in our show to ask our guests what is their middle ground.
Interesting question. I think I'm like a shark. I always need to be moving and learning new things. So while I am focused on quite a big challenge, reinventing liberalism, I also want to do something new every so often. So I've just joined a board of an AI startup, actually, called the Policy Prism. It's going to give the lobby consultancies here a run for their money, relying on AI tech to monitor the whole of the bubble. So yeah, excited about that.
And the question from the previous guest to you is, what was the pivotal moment of your life that changed everything?
And that's a huge question. I actually think there's many moments in my life where things that have changed me. I mean, I spoke about my experience already in Cairo. Another one was, I mean, when the marriage equality referendum in Ireland was recognised, it made me less ashamed of who I was, and really, I think, led me to a path of like complete confidence in my identity and personality. So yeah, those are just two pivotal moments, and I'm sure there'll be more.
And what questions would you ask to our next speaker?
To the next speaker, I would ask, I don't think I'm going to ask a big question like, what's your most pivotal moment? Maybe I'll ask, what's your favorite memory?
That's also very personal and nice. And as a tradition, we also ask our guests to bring something they cannot live without in Brussels. So can we ask our assistant and co-host Victoria to bring one? So
I brought my Mobib card because I'm a big public transport girly. I don't have a car. I think one of the reasons, if you're a city dweller, you need good public transport. And I actually live very close to your place, and I'm between the two metro lines. So for me, yeah, this is indispensable for getting around Brussels.
that's interesting because you're already a second guest who's mentioning Brussels transport system. Honestly, I have nothing to complain about. That's true that probably compared to Paris, Amsterdam is better. Is the best that we have.
Yeah, it's one of the, also we have one of the densest train lines in Europe is in Belgium, and I love trains. So for me, that's a big bonus of living in Belgium.
So we have another tradition at our show, a rapid fire question. Don't look at it. Biggest misconception about Brussels?
That it is cold. Actually, in the summer, it's very hot, as you can see from today. It's hot in here.
Book that changed the way you think?
The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. I highly recommend anybody who does any type of influencing to read it.
One word your friends would use to describe you?
Probably fun.
If you weren't in politics, what would you be doing?
Oh, I would love to be a masseuse. I love giving massages. I like caring for people. I love like really working out a knot. So yeah, I would totally be a masseuse. In the future, maybe I will actually change my career.
Best investment you ever made?
Oh, my house in Molenbeek. It's actually quite close to here, and we got it for a steal. And also the area has developed a lot, so definitely the best investment.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, that sometimes you need to lead from the back.
And finally, your favorite Brussels restaurant?
My favorite Brussels restaurant is probably Strophilia. It's in the city centre and it's a Greek restaurant, but I also have to plug my wife's restaurant. It's a cafe called Honest Brussels, and it's a all-day brunch restaurant and also a coffee roastery, and it's amazing. It's in Foray. You should visit.
We celebrate our first 1K subscribers by going there. And now we have 2 witnesses for this. Alva, thank you very much for spending this evening with us. After this interview and after witnessing everything that you're doing, I can say that I'm very happy, and we should all be lucky that the future liberal agenda is in your hands.
Thank you for having me in this very beautiful apartment, and good luck with the project.
Yes. We didn't die of a heat stroke.
This is why I wore linen.
Woo!
Yes, that was hot. Dear God.